I've always believed that some places carry the weight of their past like a shadow you can't wash away. For me, that place was the lighthouse. I never meant to live there. I never even meant to stay longer than a few nights. But sometimes life pushes you into places you don't expect. And sometimes those places push back in ways you can't imagine. This is the story of how a simple decision to watch over a lighthouse nearly destroyed me, and how I came to learn that light doesn't just guide ships through the darkness. It can also keep much darker things from reaching the shore. It all started when I lost my job in Boston. I had been drifting from one small opportunity to the next, and when the layoffs came, I packed what little I had and drove north, chasing the coast like it might offer me something stable. That's when I saw the listing. Caretaker needed for coastal lighthouse. Isolated location. Must be comfortable alone for extended periods. Room and the board provided. The pay wasn't much, but it was something. And at the time, I thought isolation sounded better than facing people who kept asking me what I planned to do next. The lighthouse was perched on a jagged cliff overlooking the Atlantic, its white tower streaked with rust from decades of sea spray. It had stood there for over 100 years, and though ships had GPS now, the Coast Guard insisted the light still needed a keeper. I thought it was romantic, in a way, an old job in a modern world. When I met the
harbor master who gave me the keys, he warned me with a half smile. "She's an old lady with a temper. Respect her, or she won't respect you." I laughed it off, thinking he was talking about the maintenance. I was wrong. The first nights were peaceful. The sound of the waves crashing against the rocks, the cry of gulls overhead, and the slow rotation of the beam sweeping across the dark water. It was almost calming. I'd make coffee, climb the spiral staircase, and sit at the lantern room watching the ocean. The light cut through the fog like a blade, and I told myself this was what I needed. Quiet, isolation, time to think. But then the noises started. At first, it was just footsteps in the lower rooms. I'd go down to check, and of course no one would be there. The lighthouse had 4 floors, and sound carried strangely through the old walls. So I chalked it up to wood, creaking, the wind, maybe even rats. But then came the voices, whispering just beneath the howl of the wind, never clear enough to understand, but enough to know they were there. Sometimes it sounded like they were calling my name. One night while I was trying to sleep in the small bedroom below the lantern, I heard knocking, slow, deliberate, like someone tapping on the outer wall of the tower. I told myself it was branches, even though there were no trees anywhere near the cliff. The knocking went on for hours, moving from one side of the tower to the other, as if circling me. I didn't sleep at all that
night. I started to notice other things. The light, which was supposed to rotate smoothly, would sometimes freeze for a moment before lurching back into motion. My tools would be misplaced. Doors I knew I had locked would stand open in the morning. I tried to explain it away, old machinery, my own absent-mindedness, but the truth was gnawing at me. I wasn't alone in that lighthouse. The villagers in the nearest town didn't help. When I went in for supplies, they'd ask how I was holding up out there, their eyes lingering too long, as if waiting for me to say something. One old fisherman clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Keep the light burning, son. Don't let it go out, no matter what." He said it like it was life or death. The worst moment came a few weeks in. I was climbing the stairs with a lantern in hand when I felt someone brush past me. Not the air, shifting, an actual body, solid, cold. I spun around, but the staircase was empty. I stumbled back, heart racing, holding the lantern high. That was when I saw the handprint on the wall. Wet, smeared, like seaweed and salt water had been pressed against it. The print was far too large to be mine. From then on, I couldn't pretend anymore. The whispers grew louder. the knocking more insistent. Some nights, I'd hear what sounded like a man sobbing at the base of the tower, only for the sound to vanish the moment I opened the door. The ocean seemed to churn more violently when the light hesitated, waves slamming against the pried rocks, as if something out there was waiting for darkness. I began keeping the lantern lit at all times, even when the sun rose. Something in my gut told me the light wasn't just for ships, it was holding something back. Something that belonged to the sea, but wanted to come inside. One stormy night, as lightning tore across the sky and rain hammered the windows, the power went out. The beam died, the lighthouse went dark. And in that moment, I heard them clearly for the first time. Voices rising from the ocean, chanting in a language I didn't know, growing louder and closer. I raced up the stairs with shaking hands, trying to light the backup oil lamp, but my matches kept going out, damp with sweat and seawater. And then I saw them figures climbing the cliff below, pale hands gripping the rocks, eyes glowing faintly in the storm. That was the night I realized the truth. The lighthouse wasn't built to guide ships. It was built to keep something out. And now, with the light gone, they were coming in. When the beam of the lighthouse died, the darkness felt alive. I've been through power outages before, but this wasn't just darkness, it was heavy, pressing, like the air itself had thickened. The storm outside howled with a kind of hunger, and for the first time since taking the job, I felt the tower shudder under the force of the waves. I kept striking matches with trembling hands, each one hissing out before it could reach the wick of the lamp. The wind howled down the wind. Stairwell, like a scream, and with each flicker of lightning through the window, I caught glimpses of them. Pale shapes against the black sea, climbing closer. Their limbs too long, their faces hidden by shadow, but unmistakably human, or almost human. My heart was hammering, and I don't remember the exact moment the lamp finally caught. The tiny flame bloomed to life, shaky at first, but then steady, filling the lantern with a sickly yellow glow. I set it in the housing, cranking the gears that made it rotate. The old lighthouse groaned in protest, but the light began to sweep across the storm once more. For a breathless instant, the beam illuminated the cliff below, and I swear I saw them scatter, sliding back into the sea, hissing like waves crashing over rocks. Then they were gone. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in the lantern room with my back against the cold wall, listening to the storm fade and the sea return to its steady rhythm. But the sense of being watched never left. Every creak of the wood, every gust of wind felt like footsteps approaching. By dawn, I'd convinced myself it had been a trick of exhaustion, maybe even my imagination. But then, I looked at the stairwell wall where I'd seen the wet handprint a week before. Now there were 3 of them. Fresh, still dripping. I thought about quitting right then, packing up and walking away, leaving the keys in the door for the harbor master to deal with. But something in me resisted. Pride, maybe. Or maybe it was that fisherman's warning that echoed in my head. Don't let it go out, no matter what. I told myself I could last the season. After all, I needed the money. And besides, what did I really have waiting for me anywhere else? The days that followed blurred together. I kept the lantern burning, obsessively checking the mechanisms, winding the gears, cleaning the glass. I became a prisoner of the light. I ate quickly, slept in brief snatches, and patrolled the tower like a man guarding a fortress. Yet, no matter how vigilant I was, things kept happening. Doors slamming on windless nights, cold patches that moved from room to room, And always the voices, growing louder, more insistent. Sometimes it sounded like a child calling for help. Other times it was laughter, cruel and echoing. One evening, I decided to push back. I stood at the balcony of the lantern room, staring into the fog, and shouted into the night, "Leave me alone! You're not welcome here!" My voice cracked against the roar of the ocean. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, from the darkness below, came a reply. Not in English, not in any language I recognized, just a guttural chorus of sounds that chilled me to the bone. And then, as if mocking me, I heard my own voice echo back, repeating my exact words. "Leave me alone! You're not welcome here." But twisted, warped, dripping with malice. That night, I dreamed of drowning, not in water, but in hands. Pale hands, dragging me down, covering my face, pushing me into a black abyss where no light could reach. I woke gasping, my sheets damp with seawater. I don't know how that's possible, but I swear on my life it happened. The salt on my skin was real. The isolation began to eat at me. I stopped going to the village for supplies, afraid the townspeople would see the terror in my eyes and know I was losing my grip. Instead, I rationed what I had, living off stale bread, canned beans, and bitter coffee. The lighthouse became my whole world, and the longer I stayed, the more I realized the place wasn't haunted in the way people think of ghosts. This wasn't some restless soul-rattling chains. This was older, deeper. The lighthouse wasn't keeping spirits in, it was keeping something out, and that something wanted in. The breaking point came one calm night, when the sea was smooth as glass. I was sitting by the window, staring at the horizon, when I noticed a faint glow beneath the water. At first, I thought it was bioluminescence, some natural phenomenon, but the glow grew brighter, and soon shapes emerged. Not boats, not fish, but outlines of people, walking along the ocean floor as though it were solid ground. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dark, fixed on me. I stumbled back from the glass, my heart pounding. When I looked again, the water was empty, but I knew they had seen me. I considered smashing the lamp, ending the job once and for all, and fleeing inland. But each time I came close to deciding, I'd hear that fisherman's voice in my memory, or see those glowing eyes in the water. And I knew, if the light went out for good, something far worse than my own fear would come crawling ashore. The nights grew longer, the whispers louder. I stopped marking days on the calendar, afraid of how many lines I'd scratched into it. I stopped writing letters I never mailed. My only purpose became the light, keeping it alive, keeping them away. Until the night when, without warning, the lamp went out again. This time, no storm, no rain, just silence. And in that silence, I heard the sound of footsteps coming up the stairs. Not creaks, not wind, real footsteps, slow, deliberate, rising closer with every second. That was the moment I realized whatever haunted the cliffs wasn't content to wait outside anymore. It had found its way in. The footsteps on the stairs were slow, measured, and heavy. I froze where I stood in the lantern room, every nerve in my body screaming to run, but there was nowhere to go. The stairwell curled down beneath me like a black throat, swallowing each creak of the unseen intruder's steps. My lantern flickered weakly in my hand, casting jittering shadows against the curved stone wall. I called out, my voice shaking. "Who's there?" The footsteps stopped, Silence stretched on for what felt like hours. Then, from just below me, a voice answered, my own voice. "Who's there?" It echoed up the stairwell, perfect in tone and cadence, but dripping with a mocking lilt that didn't belong to me. I stumbled backward until my spine pressed against the cold glass of the lantern room. My hand found the crank that rotated the great lens, and I began winding it frantically, praying the beam would blaze out over the water again. But the gears ground uselessly. The light remained dead, and below, the footsteps began again closer, faster now. I bolted. I didn't think. I just ran. Down the spiral stairs, 2 at a time, heart pounding, breath tearing out of me. The sound of pursuit echoed all around me, more footsteps now. Not just one set, but many, as though a crowd were rushing up to meet me. The voices joined in, whispering, chanting, some shrill, some guttural. My name repeated over and over, until it felt like the walls themselves were calling for me. When I reached the ground floor, the door to the outside was wide open. Salt air and mist poured into the room. I know I locked that door. I know I did. Yet there it was, yawning open to the cliff's edge and the sea beyond. I should have fled, but something in me knew better. Out there, in the dark, they were waiting. Instead, I barricaded myself inside, shoving a heavy table against the door. The whispers pressed closer, leaking through the cracks in the stone. Then came the pounding hands, dozens of them, slamming against the walls of the tower. The entire structure shuddered with each impact, as though the sea itself was trying to tear it down. I clutched the lantern like a lifeline, the tiny flame trembling, but still alive. In that moment, I remembered the harbor master's words when he gave me the keys. Respect her, or she won't respect you. He hadn't been talking about maintenance. He'd been warning me. The lighthouse was more than a building. It was a guardian. And if I couldn't get the light burning again, I would lose more than just my sanity. I forced myself back up the stairs, each step a battle against the voices, urging me to give in, to let go, to join them. At the lantern room, I found the great oil reservoir, bone dry. No storm had blown it out. No mechanical failure had stopped it. Something had drained it on purpose. My hands shook as I fumbled with the backup canisters, but when I opened them, I found only seawater sloshing inside. The mocking laughter swelled around me, rattling the glass. I fell to my knees, tears burning my eyes, whispering prayers I hadn't spoken since childhood. And then, faint but clear, I heard another voice. Not theirs, not mine, but Daniel's, the fisherman who had warned me. Don't let it go out, son. No matter what, don't let it go out. I grabbed the lantern in my hands, its flame barely more than an ember now, and held it up to the massive Fresnel lens. The great glass prism caught the tiny glow, magnified it, bent it, and to my astonishment, the faintest beam pierced out into the night. It wasn't much, but it was something. I fed the flame with scraps of paper, rags, anything that would burn, slowly, agonizingly. The light grew brighter. The pounding stopped. The whispers faltered. For the first time in weeks, the silence felt clean. I staggered to the balcony, staring out at the black sea. And there they were, dozens of pale shapes lying along the water's edge, glaring up at me with hollow eyes. But they did not climb. They did not advance. They hissed and wailed, but the light held them back. I don't know how long I stood there, watching them retreat into the waves. Hours, maybe. By dawn, they were gone. The sea looked ordinary again, calm, almost innocent. But I knew better. I knew they were still there, waiting. That morning, I packed my bag. When the harbor master came with the supply boat, I handed him the keys without a word. He looked at me for a long time, then nodded as if he understood. "She kept you alive," he said quietly. "Respect her for that." I never went back to that lighthouse. I never will. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear the waves and the whispers calling me back, promising rest, promising peace. But I know better now. Some lights aren't meant to guide ships, they're meant to keep the darkness at bay. And if that light ever goes out, the ocean won't just take ships, it will take us all.